Yeah, I think so. I'm going to show a little video first. I'm going to talk about, I've compressed like 2 hours into 20 minutes, and Piero's told me that he's definitely got a shepherd's crook ready to pull me off stage if I go over time. So if you see me getting yanked up to the side, that's what happened. But I'll be talking about the Bay Area and why places like Autodesk are here now, I think, in a way, and why you have that kind of creative atmosphere in the Bay Area. Why are we all here? There's a reason for it. It has to do with sex and drugs and rock and roll and stuff like that, not just science and technology. But there are a lot of groups and a lot of history, and I'm going to try to cover 40 years of history in 30 minutes.
Cacophony Society. Cacophony Society. Cacophony Society.
Not at all true.
We're going to visit the sewers of Oakland. Now, some people might say that that's a redundant statement.
From everyone's view, this is a choice sewer.
Spontaneous. Those amongst you who are not creative.
Yeah, beat the crap out of it! Just think how many poor oppressed souls lived inside that television set!
And the guy turned on his bullhorn, and he says, "Hey, stupid." And I knew he was talking to me.
The fenestration, defined as referred to the act of throwing something or someone out of the window. 3 features of piano, 2 dozen pieces of furniture, and household appliances being defenestrated from a 4-story building.
These pieces of furniture that have taken it upon themselves to rid themselves of the slavery of their human counters.
And we'll be handing out body parts to various folks.
Where are you going to eat this animal?
Perhaps later if we run out of other things.
McDonald's will make you fat. They serve Big Macs. They serve quarter pounders.
Santa's coming to town. Santa's already here. What do you think about Santa Claus?
Well, I didn't live until now.
The biggest game on the North American continent, an Oldsmobile. Maybe moving on to the next century, primordialism, primitivism coming back and all that, so be ready for it.
I hope you enjoyed that.
You guys aren't bad people.
So that's a little bit of a taste of some of the stuff that was taking place in San Francisco in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that I had some involvement with, or was lucky enough to be involved with, or knew somebody who was involved with, and there's a reason why all that sort of disparate stuff happened here in San Francisco, and there are a lot of groups over time in history that have ended up here, or been created here, or come to fruition here. And why do they come? Why do they come to San Francisco? Why do they come here? I mean, one wag one time said that if you shook the continent, all the fruits and nuts would roll all the way to the end, to the west coast. You can't go any further; you'll drown. So people end up here in San Francisco. Emperor Norton, who I just he was kind of a patron saint for a lot of the stuff that's taken place in San Francisco. You all know who Emperor Norton is, I hope. Anybody here not know who Emperor Norton is? Okay, well, Emperor Norton was a San Francisco businessman who lost his mind after trying to corner the rice market back in the 1840s, I believe, or it would have been the 1860s. And he lost his mind, disappeared for a few years, came back and declared himself the Emperor of the United States and Protector of Mexico. He was a very well-known character in San Francisco, extremely well-known. He was walking around with this wonderful suit on and epaulets, and basically became sort of the patron saint of San Francisco weirdos. He couldn't pay for a meal, he didn't have any money. He was fed, given drink, and basically taken in as the patron saint of San Francisco by people in the city, and is remembered as such.
Is there any landmark by his name, Norton's name?
No, Emperor Norton?
Yeah.
What about him?
Is there any landmark in San Francisco by his name?
The Bay Bridge, which is going to be renamed the Emperor Norton Bridge. He was the first person, and that's true, it is going to be renamed the Emperor Norton Bridge, but he was the first person to basically declare that we should build a bridge from San Francisco over Goat Island, now Yerba Island, to Oakland. The other, Oscar Wilde, Oscar Wilde, who visited the city at one time, came up with this observation, which I still think rings true to some degree. San Francisco, there's something going on here, earthquakes, and it's getting shaken up. It's an unsettled place. People come here because they're unsettled. They want to change their persona. Maybe they're running away from something, maybe they're running towards something, but a lot of those people ended up here. I ended up here when I ran away from home and skipped juvenile probation, hitchhiked here and slept in Golden Gate Park back in 1976. And within a year, I ran into a group called the Suicide Club, which was part of a thing called Communiversity. Communiversity was a free school that came out of the free university movement of the 60s, one of the good things that the hippies came up with. And basically the concept was that anyone could teach class, it was an exchange of information. Anyone could come to the class, it was free. And Communiversity, like I said, it was an adjunct of SF State for a while, an actual official adjunct with a small, tiny budget and a couple of student administrators. And then later, when running into some issues with SF State over the oddity of some of the classes that were taking place, the principal people in Communiversity took it out, became a 501c3 nonprofit school, and ran it for another 10 years. We would make money by distributing our catalogs around town and advertising our triannual garage sale, where everybody would just donate all their crap and stuff, good stuff, bad stuff, and people would come to the garage sale. There were maybe 1,500 people who would get the calendars in the mail, so it was a pretty large mailing list. And there was we charged set no price on the stuff. I mean, you could pay whatever you wanted for it. So for every jerk who gave you 10 cents for a record player, records were round things that music came out of. For every person who did that, there'd be 30 people who'd give you $2 for something that was worth nothing, or $4 or $5 something worth nothing. So that's how we raised money to do our catalog. I'm going to talk about the Suicide Club a little bit later, which is a group that came out of Communiversity, was sort of the weird end of the whole Communiversity experiment. Got weirder and weirder, and a lot of the experimentation that was taking place included urban exploration, street theater, infiltrating weird cults and things like that. I don't have time to go into all of this, but it was an amazing group, and I call it a confederation, because the whole collective thing was very difficult, because it's usually the loudest person is the one who sets the agenda always. So it didn't really work that well in my estimation. But what we did was more of a confederation. People who joined the Suicide Club would be able to do any kind of event that they wanted to, listed in a newsletter that we sent out, and the editorship of the newsletter rotated month to month. Everyone was expected, or at least encouraged, to be a newsletter editor. So some of them were wonderful graphics and really fun, and some of them were barely legible. But that wasn't the idea. Was that everyone would be a part of it. This is an odd thing, people being sort of equally encouraged to be creative in situations, because there are different levels of creativity, of course. But if you encourage somebody and they have a community to do it in, it's a lot easier, and people will often surprise you. Cacophony Society, I'll talk about that a little bit later. There were several things that came out of these groups. Billboard Liberation Front was a group that improved corporate advertising. There's stuff online about it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the precedents. The Beat Generation, which sort of blossomed here and then in Greenwich Village in New York. There was a reason why these people came here. Once again, it was the end of the road, and of course there are many. When you look at history and you look at how things, nothing takes place in a vacuum. With the stuff I was involved in, even though I thought when I was 18 we invented everything, I realized shortly thereafter, after reading and studying, talking to old people, that no, we indeed did not invent everything. We just had maybe our own imprimatur on it. There were groups that came before us that were doing really creative things. This is one group in particular, the hippie scene, that I think had some resonance with the stuff that came later in San Francisco. The Diggers, I don't really have time, but you must know the Diggers, and if you don't, maybe a group that gave away stuff for free because they thought stuff should be free. Odd thing to believe in the United States of America. The New Games Foundation, which is, they're having part of the 50th or 40th anniversary of the whole hippie thing. They're doing some stuff this summer. It was basically an idea that Stuart Brand had, and a bunch of people picked up and started an entire, I guess, a movement really. And it was really huge in the 70s. Some folks here might remember it, of collecting interesting games, cooperative games from around the world. A book was written called the New Games Book, and then doing trainings all around the world, educational trainings in schools, and and for other organizations, individuals, and basically ongoing for 10 years. Their best known thing was the Earth Ball. You can't really see it, but that's got an earth painted on it. You may recognize it. Ant Farm was a group that I think influenced some stuff that came later, for sure. Wonderful group of architects, artists, who did things like this. And there's a lot of stuff online about them. Gary Warren, who was the co-founder of the Suicide Club, was at this Media Burn event in 1976. 1975 was the year before I showed up here. It was pretty influenced by it, I think. This is many years later. We actually visited the Cadillac Ranch out in Texas in a cross-country trip, in 2003 with a trailer with the giant dog heads on. That's another story, but and then of course the punk scene in San Francisco was a really good scene, and it wasn't really a music scene so much as just a weird scene. There was no uniform that people had. There was no there was no safety pins. People just wore pretty much whatever they wanted to, and it was often odd. And the idea, of course, with punk being that anybody could be in a band, anybody, whether they could play music or not, which resonated pretty good. And then, of course, you have unlike other places, you're probably one of your most visible punk icons in San Francisco, of course, is to run for mayor, because that's what people do here. And I could tell stories of at least 10 different campaigns for mayor or supervisor this is one of the more high profile ones. Sister Boom Boom, Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, ran for mayor too. And they got votes because people resonate with people. V. Vale, William Burroughs Vale, who started research publishing, an enormously important receptacle of underground culture that has huge resonance with the rest of the world. His book, Modern Primitives, every time you see a kid, or if you are a kid that has a tattoo or a piercing, the tipping point came when he published the book, Modern Primitives. Because before that, nobody had that except for drunken sailors, no one, and Maori warriors. Pranks, these books, look them up if you don't know about them. Research is one of the most important, underground publishing, concerns in history. They're in San Francisco. Dead Kennedys, Winston Smith, who was a Cacophony member, and among many other things, was a collage artist who, a pretty famous collage artist, and worked with the Kennedys and did a lot of their album covers, designed the logo. He was in a punk rock club in Berlin in the late 90s. He told me this story. And he's waiting in line to go to this club. I guess it was a hoity-toity club, and the giant burly, hulking, punk rock dude with the mohawk. Looked at him. Winston looked kind of like a hippie. He had long hair like me, and he's not a hippie, trust me. He kind of looks like a hippie. And the guy looked at him and said, "You can't go in there." And the guy had a DK's logo tattooed on his fucking head. And Winston looked at him and said, "I designed that logo." So, you tattooed on your head. But anyway, so we've never judged a book by its cover. Survival Research Labs, probably the most important art combine in the last 50 years in the United States of America. Completely unknown now because they're not really good at kissing ass with the art business. Machine art group, every single blinky light, smash up fire event thing at Burning Man owes a direct debt to this group, 100%. I'm going to show a little bit of what Survival Research Labs involved in, just a bit. This is in a building that's 400 feet long, completely filled with the work of 30 different artists, all of which was smashed, run over, destroyed in some way, compromised. It's impossible to show what these events are like on film. They're overwhelming. They're like being in a free fire zone in war, in a good way. One of my favorite things I ever worked on was this show. Yeah, every machine artist and most of the fire artists from Burning Man for the first, 10, 15 years, all apprenticed at SRL. They all worked on shows at SRL at some point in time before doing stuff at Burning Man. So that's Survival Research Lab. Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. There was some crossover with Cacophony Society. The Church of the SubGenius, which was founded in Dallas, Texas, but which probably the largest contingent of this group was in San Francisco, and they had the longest running radio show on KPFA at like 3 in the morning on Friday mornings. And Church of the SubGenius was a kind of they came out of the mail art movement and scene in the and were influenced by the happening scene in New York in the 50s, but also mostly the mail art scene. And they just started writing these tracks, with art that would be included in them, and sending them for $1 you could get this religious track. Are any of you familiar with the Church of the SubGenius? Okay, not so many, huh? Well, it was hugely influential on kind of the underground punk scene to some degree, and one of the best religions you could want to be involved in. You might recognize their logo, which is Bob Dobbs, the little fellow with the pipe. And their whole idea is that people need more slack. You can interpret that any way you want to. This is another crossover, kind of from the hippie days to the 90s, and then later. This is the annual St. Stupid's Day Parade, which takes place every April 1st. It's coming up this April 1st, and where people go and collect together wearing, stupid costumes and celebrate the single unifying factor of humanity, which is stupidity, because it's something that everyone shares. And also it's making it the basis for a religion that everyone is a member of. And instead of, other religions have their iconography and their different things that they do, like, your Catholicism, you do a sign of the cross. In this religion, the sign is like this. It's looking off in the distance, and it makes a lot more sense when you're thinking about spiritual things, because what do we really know? So this takes place in San Francisco. Why is it here? I don't know. Critical Mass started in San Francisco. Better or worse, Chris Carlson and a bunch of other bicyclists, bored and all working people decided they'd do a Friday ride, spread all over the world. For better, mostly better. Litquake started here. The unifying factor of these things that they were created. They're mostly non-commercial, or almost all non-commercial, and created by people in a sort of a collaborative sense, as confederations. Jack Bulwar and some of the folks who started Litquake, they just said, hey, let's have some readings in bars, and now it's this massive event, and they have Litquakes all around the world. Negative Land, the sound collage group, mixing and mashing things together, one of the progenitors of this whole scene. It's Berkeley group, very influential in experimental music and in what's called culture jamming, which is kind of a dorky term, but it basically means messing with the predominant media, messing with the predominant culture in a way, taking it, twisting it around a little bit, you know, making a joke out of it, but a serious joke maybe. These are some of the boys in Negative Land. Adbusters was influenced by all this stuff. They figured out a way to market it really successfully, marketing and anti-marketing. We're influenced by Negative Land and Billboard Liberation Front. These guys, Daniel Koch, he was with Apple Computer in the beginning, kind of crossed over to Cacophony and Burning Man for sure. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, John Gilmore on the left, and actually Barlow too, John Perry Barlow, were both involved in the Suicide Club. John Gilmore was a member for many years, and Barlow came on a couple of Golden Gate Bridge climbs. Electronic Frontier Foundation, do you guys know what that is? I'm covering a lot of territory here, sorry. They've been fighting the government on encryption issues, and they have a cadre of volunteer attorneys and basically doing really good work out there, and they're here in the Bay Area. Brewster Kahle in the Internet Archives here in the Bay Area. Why is that here? Okay, some guy made a pile of money and did something really awesome with it for once. You know. Also, early Burning Man, really cool guy. Bianca Smut Shack, which was the first chat room on the internet. Early Burning Man, and a lot of crossover with these other groups. They're all interconnected. It's kind of an incestuous scene here. Actually, speaking of Burning Man, the best thing about early Burning Man was how it mixed up a lot of these different groups. Because back then, I mean, I knew different scenes in San Francisco. You'd have your hippies, and you'd have your machine artists, and your punk rockers, and your ravers, and none of them talked to each other. They're like, oh, hell with those guys. And they kind of contained the goths, you know, on their little scenes. When they went out to Burning Man, right, their tent got blown down and was rolling across the desert, and some, you know, the machine artist next to the hippie would help them out, putting his tent back up, or vice versa. And so kind of broke down those barriers of those social, you know, like poser barriers that you have in social groups that are based around some particular costume, usually, which Burning Man is now one of those. They have their costume, and you know what it, and you all probably know what it is. University, to touch on it just briefly, here's some of the, you know, the class calendars. We had a lot of fun in Communiversity. That's the other thing. For not having fun, no matter what you're doing, you probably are losing. Gary Warren, student administrator, one of the most, actually I take that back, he's the most visionary human being I've ever known in my entire life, and you've never heard of him. But he died at a very young age, and that's why. He died at 35 in 1983. Had a bookstore, had a place called the Gorilla Grotto. This is a giant playpen, a giant like baby playpen, where people would go in and we'd have events and talks, and people would do discussion groups, and then they'd have a giant fucking pillow fight because it was fun. This is the staff of the Gorilla Grotto. It was down on Frederick Street. Dave Warren, one of the founders of the Suicide Club, before he joined the Suicide Club, he was this interesting guy who would do things like this. He would go down to Union Square on Friday the 13th with a ladder and a bunch of mirrors and dare people to smash mirrors and walk under ladders. And his whole thing would be super not superstitious. So he's a nut, but he was a really interesting, fun, and intelligent nut. And when he got together with Gary Warren, they started the Suicide Club, and a lot of stuff came out of that. David also passed away about 7 years ago. Robert Louis Stevenson was the influence for the name and some of the aesthetics of the Suicide Club. He wrote a book called The Suicide Club, a combination of a series of stories about a group of men who put their worldly affairs in order to live each day as though it were their last. For indeed, you never know, it might be. Lon Chaney Sr. had a big influence on some of the stuff that we were doing. His Clown at Midnight, which was a really kind of scary concept. You can see a clown is funny in the circus ring, but what would be the normal reaction opening a door at midnight and finding the same clown standing there in the moonlight? Kind of creepy. Some of the stuff that influenced what we were doing, a lot of the stuff in the Suicide Club, which is an urban adventure and pranks and street theater group, we were influenced by the Dadaists in great part, but also by Pulp Fiction, American B movies, stuff like that. Dashiell Hammett was a big influence. Don Herron, who to this day does the Dashiell Hammett walking tour, which is the longest lived literary walking tour in the country, possibly the world, started as a Suicide Club event in 1977 when he was doing events based on these stories where we get dressed up as gangsters and whatnot. Anyway, moving along right here, Suicide Club was known for naked cable cars. Climbing bridges was a big thing we were known for. We also went out of town. We do away trips, so to speak. Manhattan Bridge. I'm going to run out of time here in a little bit, so I just want to say, this stuff is still ongoing, and this atmosphere in San Francisco, which maybe it's in the water or the air, I'm not really sure what, but there's a reason why these groups become, there's a reason why, you know, the internet was built here and created here to a larger degree. There's a reason why a lot of cultural and social movements begin here. San Francisco is a town that, unlike New York and Los Angeles, which are great places for creative people, San Francisco, the difference, at least up until pretty recently, and hopefully on into the future, depending on how things go, the difference being it was not as much for the arts, not as much of a professional town as it was a place where people could collaborate. I mean, if you go to New York or LA and you're, you know, pursuing a career as an artist, maybe, you know, you don't share your ideas as much, maybe you don't collaborate as much. San Francisco, anybody has a crazy idea, you can find 20 people who will help you do the crazy idea, and then you help them with their crazy idea. And some of the crazy ideas end up not being that crazy. Some of them are still pretty crazy. Some of the other Billboard stuff. Neon Billboard, the Billboard Liberation Front did in 1996. And there are groups now. There are a lot of young urban exploration groups right now today that are out there creeping around, you know, doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. Sorry about SantaCon. That was one of the misfires. But it's actually still kind of fun, but you know. And in a way, actually, if you got if you know what SantaCon is, when all these idiot Santas run around and basically take over your hipster neighborhood, which I don't know if that's bad. This was back this third year we did SantaCon. That was a bad Santa. A lot of times at the games and events we were doing, it wasn't really a successful event or party unless you were playing with the blue team. Meat Parade, you already saw some of that stuff on the video. Earthquake, art cars were a big part of the scene, and early Burning Man was influenced a lot by art cars. Herod Blank and Philo Northrop and some of those people. Car Hunt. Here's some of the pranks that we did in Cacophony. This was a protest of the showing of the movie Fantasia at the Castro Theater, which was the lead in an article in Time magazine on how Bay Area is filled with whiny identity politics and didn't do their fact checking. And this was back in the 90s, so you can imagine how bad it is now with fact checking in the media, which is great opening for pranksters. Stuff that's going on now a little bit later, there's still groups doing urban exploration. A little takeoff on the Adbusters Buy Nothing Day. This is a Cacophony 2.0 in the early 2000s. This thing you've probably heard of. Started out as a temporary autonomous zone, which is basically a place where you had really no rules and people were expected not to be dicks. And oddly enough, the social order encouraged not being a dick. And it worked out pretty well for a long time. Dave Warren and Steve Mobia. David was lit the Burning Man on flames the second to last year on Baker Beach, and then again the first year on the playa on the desert. Another little event, Cacophony event. This is a Beta Breakers race where everybody's racing from the bay to the sea, except for Cacophony. Project Mayhem, which was Chuck Palahniuk's crazy organization of prankster degenerates in the movie Fight Club, was based directly on the Cacophony Society. And I'd like to show this little video to finish, because this is what I would like to see happen somewhere. These buildings in the background are credit card companies. And that's a scene from the movie Fight Club. So that's my 2-hour presentation in 25 minutes.